Hello again, Tim here. Welcome to my live demo and our Patreon project for, well, we'll call it December. I know we're not in December, but when I normally set these projects and I get my submissions, I normally set the month name for the month that I'm going to get the submissions on. So this is December, all right? And November we did Istanbul, which hopefully you enjoyed that. We're sort of moving, we're doing our virtual journey around the world, and we're going through Europe now. We've ended up in Europe. Well, we started off in Europe and then we went westwards. So we're in Europe, and a Greek village scene. It's actually Mykonos, if you've ever been there, one of the back streets, but it could be anywhere in that part of the world, with these typical white buildings and lovely blue sky there as well. So more on that in a minute. So this demo is for Patreon members only. It's being recorded afterwards, after the presentation, after the demo. You will hopefully get an email from the Crowdcast system with a link to recording. It will be the same URL, the same link. All right, that's one of the reasons why I've chosen the Crowdcast system. It's got the integration with Patreon, and it's so easy to register and watch the event and then watch the recording on that same link. Nothing extra to remember about. So after the demo is finished, just allow a little bit of time for the system to process the recording before you can play it back on your device. For those of you on the relevant Patreon membership level or tier, you can send me a photograph of your painting and I will give you an individual critique, which will be in writing, a short text response to you, or a short video for you, depending on the tier that you're on. Now you can paint along with me or just watch the demo and paint along afterwards. I know a few of you, I know Joseph's done this. He actually paints along and sends me his during painting and the after painting. And sometimes you find the painting that you do spontaneously during the demo, you're more happy with than the one that you take a little bit of time with. It's one of those weird things with painting, the different results you get when you're fresh to something. You do it quickly, and then other times you overthink things, you get tighter and you get a little bit more precise. So we want to be a little bit loose with this. Remember, there is the community tab also on Patreon for you to share your painting. I know most of you here listening live, you're familiar with the community tab on a Patreon for you to share this and other paintings as well. Now, the audio part of this demo is one way only. I forgot to say that. You've gathered that already. Your microphone is on mute. I can't hear you. Although I can open up your microphone. If you're desperate for us to speak live or for me to see you, I can open it up, but normally on these demos, I just keep the audio one way only, so you can hear me. I can't hear you. If you've got a question, please click on the Ask a Question button somewhere on your device, your screen. For me, it's down the bottom of my screen. Click on the Ask a Question button, type in your question, and I'll read that out at appropriate stages of the painting. I'll just give out your first name as well. So if you see me paint before, you'll see that I go through in various stages. There will be plenty of opportunities to ask those questions. So don't put your question in chat, pop it on the Ask a Question button, because if you could do it in a chat, I'll just lose it. Right, so I've mentioned the source photo, the green button, the poll, the chat. I think that's pretty much it. Fairly simple interface that we've got here. Right, subject for the demo is this Greek scene. A photograph of mine from quite a few years ago, well, 5-6 years ago maybe, and quite a nice scene. Different this one in that we've got the light behind us, but what we want to try and do is get the feeling of that bright sunlight. All right, the contrast, that high contrast between these white buildings and that lovely blue sky, the geometric shape of these shadows. Just don't get hung up by the building itself and these walls that are coming out and the angles and so on. Just think about these shapes, you know, across, down, angle, across, down, across, down, that angle there. Yeah, just think about these angles, these shapes that we're getting. It's got a lot of, I think it's got a lot of interest. We've got that little chimney. I think it is a chimney. I can imagine there's a wood burning stove down there somewhere in the chimney there. And then there's this three-wheeled vehicle, which you quite often find in this part of the world. Great sort of utility vehicle, but the hood, the top of the cabin and the way it just connects with everything, whether that shadow comes down there and it's cut off there and the shadow here, that might be quite nice. Bit of a geometric shape to contend with, bit of perspective there as we've got perspective in the street. Just think about these angles. All right, so steeper there, and then as we come down, it will be, just think about that arc. All right, and likewise on this side as well, that railing there is about that angle, and then as we come down, the top of that blind is something like that, and then as we come down further still, top of this sort of storage unit here, we've gone down below the horizontal, and then street level. The contrast I mentioned already, that lovely blue sky against the white buildings, although they're not truly white, are they? I'm not sure whether this shows up, but if you do look at the source photo, there's it's just slightly off-white, I would say. There are some elements that are bright white. The little, well, this corner here going down, corner there, bright white. Maybe the canopy of the cabin of that truck, white. Some areas here, white. This floodlight, the right-hand side, this right-hand side, catching the light there. So some bits are true white, but others just slightly off-white. And these dark shadows in there and underneath the truck. The light is sort of coming from the right, I think, or it might be just slightly behind us, but mainly from the right, coming down that way. And this building here, although it is in the shade, of course, but it is being affected by some reflected sunlight coming off these bright buildings. So the sun coming down here and then bouncing off and maybe lighting up that area there. So it might be a little bit dark at the top, but quite light down there, and then darker shadows. And a slight difficulty, the street and these slabs going up the street, the sort of, in the UK we call it crazy paving, and there's a little bit of a gradient down to the middle of the street, I guess for drainage. So it sort of comes down that side, comes down on the left-hand side. There might be, if it was raining, there'd be I guess a channel of water coming down there, and this lighter sort of mortar between the slabs. We'll pop in a figure. There are some figures here. There's somebody that's just disappeared into a doorway there. There's a figure here, so good reference for the height of those figures. There's a utility pole here. Not sure if it's electricity or electricity or telephone, maybe a combination of both. But that's another area of interest. It is in the middle of this scene. We want to try and maybe, I've said so many times before, try not to get things bang in the middle, something that might be a focal point. Yeah, so areas of interest: chimney, three-wheeled truck, and the top of the cabin, figure, the pole, geometric shape of the shadows, thinking about the colors in those shadows as well. We don't want it to be a boring gray. We want to try and introduce some subtle different shades of color in there. Now, materials. I'm using Saunders Waterford watercolor paper. It's pure cotton. It's 15 inches by 11 inches. This is cold press paper and it's 300 grams. The paints I'm using are handmade paints from Jackman's Arts in the UK, and my same colors as per previous demos: neutral tint, burnt umber. I'll describe this as I go through. Burnt sienna, yellow ochre is cracking up there. Viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, a lavender down there, 3 mixing wells. I've got my water over on the right hand side, which you can just, maybe you can just see the edge of that container. And bottom right corner, I've got my sponge. Pencil is a 3B pencil for drawing the outline. Brushes, well, there's a few I'll be using for this. There's going to be a fairly big mop brush to start with. That's a synthetic mop brush. Then I've got a squirrel mop brush, so natural brush, bit softer, or a good bit softer actually. A synthetic round brush with a good point. I might be using, or I'm pretty sure I will be using, maybe a smaller synthetic round brush. And then this, I was thinking about this bush here, which I hadn't noticed before when I looked at this photo, but there's this sort of, I'm not sure if it's an oleander bush that's just creeping in from the top left corner. That might be a nice additional element to introduce to the painting. And I like using a sword brush for doing leaf shapes and these little stalks. So a sword brush there, or a dagger brush, do you see, with that distinctive brush head shape. Right, so are there any questions before we start? Before we start, so you can paint along with me if you want to. I'll just get that picture out of the screen. Don't think there's any questions actually. Let me just check. No questions. Right, let me get to it then. Start with drawing. Now, I did do a little preliminary plan of this, and sometimes I do this. I like to do this for demonstrations like this, just to explain my thought process and the sequence of steps I'm going through. So I've just done some basic outlines of the scene, and then I've numbered them as regards the sequence I'm going to go through, the painting sequence I'm going to go through. I was asked, I think it was the last demo I did, or the demo before that, don't you do a thumbnail sketch with the values as regards, where the dark's going to be, where the light's going to be. I rarely do that. For me personally, I find this more useful because I think the sequence of in which you do the watercolor painting is just as important as the values, where's the darkest dark's going to be, where the lightest light's going to be. So this is just my own personal preference and numbering them. So one is the sky, 2, maybe some subtle, very light coloring of the white building, just to remove the white of the paper. 3 will be the shadow of the building and the shady wall of the building and the shadow across the street, and then these geometric shadows on the left hand side. That's going to give form to that left hand side there. 5, I think I'm going to do the truck. I may change my mind, but this is what I'm thinking right now. 5 is the truck, and then 6, the details, people, the steps, railings, pole in there, Just little bits and pieces to pull it all together. So in between those, I'll have a little stop, and you can ask me any questions if you've got those. All right, so on with the drawing. Oh, there's a question. Hang on a second. Let me just get this one out of the way. Ingo, do you try different? Ingo's asking, do you try different papers every now and again? For example, someone else besides Saunders. I have done a long time ago, Ingo, but now I just stick with the one that I find that there are with watercolor. There are so many different variables, and the more choices you give yourself, the more confusing it can be. And you just got to go with a particular brand of paper that you're comfortable with, and you've used it so many times. You just get used to its features and how it absorbs the paint and how quickly it dries and the color of it. This is the slightly off-white watercolor paper from Saunders. You can get bright white, which actually the high white or bright white Saunders would be quite good for this. But no, I just stick with Saunders. But there are so many different brands, very good brands out there. Arsh. There's a good half dozen decent brands of paper that in your particular locale, I'm sure you can easily get hold of and just stick with what you know. So thanks very much, Ingo, for that. Right, let me just make a start then. And 3B pencil, just to get in the main shapes of what we're doing here. I'm going to start with the top of the sky and just lightly just draw in the buildings. Now I'm not doing a solid line at the top there, because that I do want a sort of crisp edge between the blue and the white. So I'm not really going in too heavy. Excuse me, I think it's sort of showing through there. It's showing on my screen anyway. We've got the side of the building here, so I'm just starting to think about the perspective of the buildings, and then we go down to the back of the street, and then we're on the right hand side of the street here, where there's two staircases. So this is the furthest one, and then the nearest one, and the building goes up like that. Okay, so we've got the two staircases. Bit of a shadow below the top level. There's a staircase there. There's a staircase there. The street, the back of the street is there. There's a shadow that comes down and it goes up on the left-hand side. Now let me get in the top of the cabin of this quaint little three-wheeled vehicle. There's the cabin. And then the actual truck bit. There's a little bit like that. So left-hand side, right-hand side. There's that corner there. that corner there. Just thinking about the shape now. The shape underneath the, around the chassis and that's the shadow there. And then that wheel, you need to be a bit careful with that wheel and the arch. So shadow, and then the wheel is around. Well, let's actually get this mud guard, this wheel arch right first of all. There we are, that's that wheel. We can't see the front wheel, but we've got this right-hand wheel here. There we are, and the shadow underneath. Now, shadows on this left-hand side, the geometric shadows. So there's what I'm talking about, these shadows over here, quite striking. That angle there is about 45 degrees or thereabouts. So it's around about here, all right, 45 degrees. And then there's a sort of wall that comes out there. There's a higher bit here. There's a red staircase just above the truck, somewhere like that. And a diagonal shadow like that. No, I'm actually drawing the edge now, these shadows. So let's go down to that angle there, 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 and down to about there, and then the shadow goes off. So this is in the shade, and then we've got these two walls here with that little white strip about there. All right, so that's going to be white. I'm not drawing in the oleander that's coming in from the top left corner. The pole will be around about there. Again, I'm not going to draw in the pole, but it's going to be like that there, and not have it too much in the middle. A figure or two. So looking at the reference points, well, I'm sure that's a figure there. Somebody has just gone into that building. So this is the sort of height of people's heads, that sort of level there. It's about the same height as the top of that cabin as a reference point. So it's always good that when you've done the drawing, if you've done a window or a doorway, that might, or the top of a car, that might serve as a good reference point for the top of someone's head. Let's get in a figure. Very loose figure. In there. All right, in the shadows. These shadows up the street, again, it's another shape, bit of a jagged edge. It's quite soft there, the actual edge. Soft edge, a little bit harder there for some reason. And it's sort of going across the street. We've got that light at the end of the street, a jagged edge going up to the top of the shadow, a little bit of an angle there, and it does come down to the top of the cabin, and then it re-emerges on the street and comes down into the bottom right corner. I do need to get in on the other street level. Where are the bottoms of these buildings? And that's something like that. Okay. So let's just check I've got everything correct before I commit to painting. Just to recap: chimney, truck. Ooh, we've got the window, back window of the truck, where we can just sort of see something going on. And then the front windscreen, we can just see through the side opening there. Truck with its shadow, right hand side, getting the angles right. Check your angles. The drawing's got to be as good as you can get it before you start painting, because you can't really rectify things afterwards. So that angle there might be steeper than these angles, just a little bit, by a degree or two. And side of the street, two little openings at the top of the chimney. There's a sort of extension that comes out there, and there's two windows there. Not many windows to deal with, quite simple. I think I'm about finished with my drawing. So hopefully that's okay with you, those of you that are following along with me. Let me just, so before I start painting, let me just see if there's any questions. And there's one, I think. Peter's asking, what kind of pencil are you using? It's a mechanical pencil from, I'm not sure how you pronounce this. It's Faber-Castell. Can you see it there? The logo, mechanical pencil, and it's I think it's 2 or 3 millimeters in diameter. So it's not, you know, the 0.5, or you can get quite thin mechanical pencils. But I guess with the 3B being a soft pencil, if I went quite small, it'd be quite fragile. It'd be snapping all over the place. So it's fairly thick. Right, thanks very much, Peter. Right, back to the plan then. Sky, details on the, take the whiteness of the paper out on the left-hand side. 3, shadow of building going across the street, defining a little bit more of the truck there. And then 4, these geometric shadows on the left-hand side, and then 5, the actual truck itself, and then 6, details. Stick to the plan if you can. First brush then, for me, I'm going to use a fairly soft synthetic mop brush with hopefully a good edge to it, so I can be a little bit precise with the painting around the rooftops there, the buildings, just to get that crisp white edge. Now this sky, what blue are you going to use to make that sky? For me, I think it's a bit of a combination of, I like a 50-50 combination. I went through my colors, but 50% half cerulean blue, half cobalt blue. I think the combination of those is particularly more, it's a little bit sort of warmer coming down towards the bottom, all that cerulean blue, and maybe cooler at the top. It's more intense blue. So a little bit weaker down towards the horizon. Big brush then in my mixing well. This dark bit here, that's where the enamel of my palette has long since, this palette's about 10 years old. I should really change it, but you keep hold of these things. So that 50-50 mix. Keep mixing. Want to make sure it's mixed really well. I think this is actually quite an important bit of the painting, getting this edge right, getting the drama of the contrast of the sky against that the white building. Maybe a bit more cobalt for the top. There we are. I think that's about right. And then just really go for it. Come a little bit lighter as we come down to the bottom. Like that. Doesn't matter, there's a few little sparkles in the sky that you've left. We can make those into something, maybe some birds. There's a bit of a bead forming there. Just mop that up a little bit. There we go. Right, now these, take off the white of the white building just to tone it down a little bit. Well, don't get fixated by the colors here. We just want to introduce a slightly darker value to these buildings, retaining just a few fundamental parts of the building, keep them white, like the corner of that wall there, corner of that wall, little whites here and there. So there's lots of vertical elements to this. Now, you could use a big brush for creating these vertical elements, or you could, something might find use a small hake brush for doing these strong verticals. All right, this is a goat's hair. That might be quite easy to do those. I'll stick with this brush. See how we get on with this. And really just something, you might have a slightly dirty palette like mine, where you've got some previous color and just introduce that color there. Be careful not to, my sky's still wet, so don't go too much into that. There, that's that top half of the building. Now, don't need to worry too much about the shade, but that line there, that's just to the left of that white edge. So something very weak, not too grey. And then the other side. Down. Try and keep it vertical. Doesn't matter if you go over the truck, that's going to be darker. Down towards the street and then up to that next white line. Let's keep them parallel. Make it a bit cooler actually. So take some of that sky mix, quite watery, and that side, careful. Then up to the main building that's facing us. So I'm just taking out the edge off that paper. Imagine the light coming from the right hand side so you can sort of judge where the darker areas are going to be. So for example, there, that's going to be lighter than that. And then leave it, really. Oh, it will come across the road as well for good measure. This will be the colour of the mortar. There, don't need to be too precise. That's fine. So just a quick recap, done the sky. We've got that main white wall covered. Next step, when this edge is dry, I'll be able to, now mine's still fairly damp. I'm looking at, I can see a little bit of a glistening on it. I just gently touch it. It might be still fairly damp. I want to go, this will be the next darkest. So actually, that sky is a little bit darker than the buildings there. But as we come down to the bottom, like that staircase, this is quite tricky. That area there is lighter than the sky, but as we come down, parts of the building are now going to be darker than the sky. All right. So it's going to keep us on our toes, this, to get those values right. I'm going to now use a softer brush, pretty much the same size, but I just prefer a softer brush for this stage. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down to the bottom and then come across to the shadows across the street and then just creating that top of that cabin there. There's a little bit of a bead forming here. Let me just mop this up. Resist the temptation to go back into this. Once you've done it, leave it. Don't muck about with it. And it will dry, hopefully it will dry a little bit lighter as well. There's a question. Let me just answer this question before I go on. So Jez, that looks like a lovely brush, Tim. What is the make? So the first brush was a Raphael Soft Aqua. All right. And the next brush is a Pure Squirrel mop brush, Petit Gris Pur. My French is correct, Winsor & Newton. But honestly, there are other makes available. The Jacksons do one in the UK. There's a Rosemary brush. All the same hairs, and the type of brush, so there's lots of different types available. Right. Thanks very much, Jez. Don't think there's any more questions. So, right-hand side. Now, what color? What color is this building? Well, it's dark. We don't want it to be too grey. Maybe it's inheriting some of the color of the things around them. So there's reds, there's blues, there's maybe a bit of light bouncing off the street where you've got these grey slabs. So a bit of a concoction here. So don't get too fixated by the color, but just not make it grey, make it interesting, and think about those values. All right, and a little bit of a glow maybe around about here where the light's coming down and it's sort of coming into the narrow street here. So let me just, oops, this brush is, that's the Jackson's brush. This is the brush I want. The Winsor & Newton one, they're the same actually, but this one just got a little bit of a better edge to it. So mix up something appropriate. A little bit of alizarin crimson, bit of ultramarine blue, bit of burnt sienna, actually a bit of yellow ochre at the top. And we'll see what that looks like. It's quite soft, this brush. I can just alternate that color. I just picked up a little bit of cobalt. And then continue on down. That area there will be obliterated by the railing of the top platform. And then as we come down, alternating these colors, let's go with a little bit of blue. And we're going a bit darker in the distance here. So ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, not too much water on the brush, and just looking at the photograph. We come round and we're going over the figure. Now, importantly, we need to get the shape right on the far side. Cobalt blue. And up to the edge of the cabin of the truck. Down to the bottom of the buildings. And then there might be a little bit of a shiny bit there. It's good. That's because of the lighting. It's catching that. Now, shadow across the street. There's that lighter bit there where there's some cupboards. We'll go a bit darker in there. And then finish off in the bottom right corner, maybe a little bit darker. Perhaps a little bit more blue in there. Okay, so I've gone a little bit over the truck. Oh, I left out my little, there should have been a little light there. If I get a bit of tissue, I can maybe just lift off a little bit of the paint just to give us this little right hand edge of the floodlight. So maybe around about there. Okay, that will do. So, any questions? Don't think there are. Yep. So I see as it's drying, you this shine with the light that will disappear. Let me now do, sticking to the plan, number 4, the geometric shapes, the shadows on the left hand side. Again, quite an important element to this, connecting that wall with the truck that's then connected to the shadow, so they're all kind of intermingled with each other. I'll stick with the pure squirrel mop brush. Gives me a nice edge. Start with the left hand side there, and a similar sort of color, really. Maybe something a bit warmer. So we'll start off in the top left corner. And introduce a little bit of coolness to it. Get that angle right there. Get that angle right there. And then that angle right. Let's just continue down on this side. Try and make this parallel to the left-hand edge. Like that. And then continuing over. So I'm using this mop brush, almost like a smaller version of that, really, with that flat edge, so I can get these nice points. And it holds a lot of paint as well. Do this once. So we've got the other angle coming from a balcony, hitting the top of the cabin, and then down the left-hand side there. Right, I think that's it for that left-hand side. You can just, while it's still damp, you can be adding in different colors in there, bit of orange maybe, bit of cad orange, just to liven that up a bit. Cabin of the truck, and then the actual the back of the truck itself. I think I'm going to now choose a synthetic brush. Let me go to this one here. And first of all, let's just, this is what we can see through the back window. And then the truck itself, it's quite dark, the back of the cabin, and then there's a sort of this metallic color for the side of the truck, a little bit darker there, and then very dark with the shadow. I might go back to my squirrel mop for doing the shadow. So let's just check how dry that is. Yeah, for me that's quite dry there, because I'm going to go with a darker line just to create the right-hand side of the cabin. There's a sort of support there. Okay, what's the color of the back of that truck? It's like a greeny blue, ultramarine blue. Let's add a bit of viridian green to that. Ultramarine blue, bit of viridian green. Bit of burnt sienna as well, try and make it darker. Viridian green, ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue, viridian green. Yeah, I think that's about right. Bit more viridian. So not too much paint on the brush, and needs to be darker than that. Add a bit of neutral tint. Viridian green, ultramarine blue, bit of neutral tint now to make it a little bit darker. So that's the top, just below the top of the cabin, and then slightly circular corners to the window. And then the support down this right-hand side. There we go. Same brush. That metallic color. How can I get that sort of metallic color? bit of cerulean, bit of burnt sienna. Oh, too much burnt sienna, bit of cerulean. Bit more cerulean. There we go. A little bit of a test. That's the inside, and then the back of the truck. Be a little bit more precise with this. Perhaps cerulean blue, bit of burnt sienna, too much burnt sienna. It's a nice grey, that's cerulean blue and burnt sienna. Down to the bottom of the back of that truck, and then up the right hand side. Maybe it's a little bit lighter there because the lighter course is just catching that side a bit more. So a few dry brush marks. Now dark at the back of this truck. Just be a bit careful with this, not to connect with the sides of the truck. Just retain a little bit of a light edge to that side, and then that side there. Right, next, shadow underneath the truck. Let's go back to my mop brush and pick up something quite dark. Ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. Too much alizarin crimson. Bit of burnt sienna, bit of neutral tint. It is actually quite dark underneath there. Very dark. So now the back of my truck is still wet, so I've got to be very careful not to touch it too much. There's a square number plate at the back, little one there. And then we've got the shadow now up to the wheel arch, and this mud guard. So top of the mud guard, and then That's the bottom of the wheel, and let's be a bit more precise with the other side. There we go. That'll do for that side. We'll tidy it up when we get to the detail stage. Next, what else is on the plan? Well, we're almost at the detail stage. I'll just let that dry a little bit, see if there's any questions at all before I go on to the details. See, that's drying quite nicely there. Right, one question. Hang on a second. Joseph, shadows in the painting should be darker than those in reality because white paper is not as white as whites in reality, question mark. Well, yeah, I think when you do plein air painting, I think you do see shadows. For me, I do see them a little bit darker than they are. Say if a photograph took it, this was a photograph, maybe the exposure rating, they could appear a little bit, it sort of contorts it does not give you the true values of photographs. So I tend to go a little bit dark with my darks if I'm painting from a photo, just to get that extra little bit of contrast, bit of extra contrast. Just going to see if I can just lighten up that bit down there. There's a little bit of light underneath that shadow. Okay, details. Well, we want to get in. What do I mean by details? The sort of fine elements. These railings, the side of the balconies here, the railings, the figures, the pole, details on the vehicle and the lights, and then the oleander bush there. I'm going to go down to a smaller brush, actually a smaller brush, a synthetic brush, Let me just start on the left hand side with this reddish railings here, although they're a cool red, really. Bit of alizarin crimson, bit of red, maybe turn it down a bit with a bit of blue. There we go. So there's a structure there. There's a structure there. And then the top of the balcony and the railings down the steps, they go like that down to, again, the top of that truck, just to create a nice bit of an edge there. There's some geraniums and things dotted around the place. Let's put in a few little windows. Let's pick up a bit of this cobalt. for those windows. Up at the top here, there's some openings at the top of the chimney, and just a few little lines there. There's a bit of a shadow on that one. A window here. A window there, and then there's bits and pieces we can see in the distance. Truck. I think this is quite dry. Oh no, it's still wet, a bit wet. That is it. That should be okay. Truck. Back of this truck. Bit of a dark shadow with the light below it. Corner. Corner. There's the little bit of shadow inside the wheel. There's some tail lights on that truck. Let's get in the figure now. Dark figure in the dark shadows, still with a small brush. Head. And then the body. There we are. A figure. There's some distant staircases, quite blue. Let's pick up a bit of dark blue and give the impression of some of those in the distance there. And then up the side, up the right-hand side, there's some more blue railings. And then these railings are red, back to this red colour again. That's sienna. A little bit of alizarin crimson. And top of the railing, corner post. The side, there's a sort of gate or something at the top there, and the staircase, the railings. Now I've got to be a bit careful here. Get a nice line. There's my guide. And the bottom, and then the sort of spindles or whatever you call them in between. Up the top, we've got some windows or verandas or shutters up there. There's some more red railings going up there. The steps on the staircases, let me go back to my medium-sized pointed round brush, pick up something dark, not too dark, and then let's start with the far staircase first of all. There's a sort of right-hand edge of the staircase there. There we go. And then something similar. This larger staircase, so the top of the stairs are around about there. And then we come down. Again, they stop there. That's that far side. There's a blind here that's gathered up. Don't put too much detail on that right-hand side. Now, next, the slabs on the road, which are fairly light here, but a little bit darker, of course, in the shadows. And they're all sort of quirky shapes. So let's keep with this brush, I think. And a sort of brownish, grayish, so burnt sienna. A little bit of this blue will do. Yeah, that's all right. And then just go for it, really. I haven't drawn these in, but we'll just, oops, that's too dark. I want to keep them fairly light on this side. If you've laid slabs, you'll be familiar with this shape of these. Don't want to be too precise. You can't, some of them you can't actually see the joint between them up to the shadow. Down to the edge of the paper. Pretty laborious, this this part of it. Apologies for not too much commentary here, but it's got to be done, isn't it? These slabs. So keep it lighter on this side. Maybe some of them a little bit darker than others. You've got some subtle variations in the shade. Let's have a lighter one. And then darker now in the shadows. I've got to get that pole in as well. And the oleander. So something a little bit darker, a bit more ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and now these slabs, they're going to be pretty difficult to see in the distance. There's a sort of lighter area where there's a sort of gully for the drainage down the middle. Just underneath this figure. Start from the middle and work my way out. And continue down to the bottom right corner. too dark. Lighten it up a bit. Of course, with the angle of some of these slabs, I'm trying to give the impression of this slight gradient, bit of a slope down into the middle. Maybe these slabs are a little bit large as we come to the foreground. There, I think that's all right. Maybe if some of them are a little bit too dark, we can do a bit of gentle lifting off. That gives them a bit more of a sort of rock construction material type appearance. Now, utility pole and the cables coming out from it. So let's first of all get in the pole itself. So I've got to be careful here not to smudge my work that I've done already. Oh, there's a little white mark there. We'll use that. That could be a bit of shine that's hitting the pole. This needs to be a bit more watery. There we are. Perhaps make this shiny bit just a little bit narrower. And then I'll use a rigger brush for doing the cables. So a rigger brush here. So this is a Lebanson brush, bamboo handle, reclaimed fibers of some lady's faux fur jacket. And let's pick up something here, whatever's in the palette. And there's a line there. A few more on the left-hand side. There we go. You often find cables sort of in these old streets, cables all over the place. And there's some going up the side as well. I completely obliterated my floodlight, not concentrating really on that. Can't really, it's sort of behind there. Got the staircase in front of that, that's all right. Now, oleander. bush over on the left hand side. Back to my sword brush. Where's my sword brush gone? Here we go. Sword brush. Something dark green, so neutral tint. Perhaps a little bit of cow yellow to make it a bit, add in that bit of green. And then just a few green leaves, and then mostly darker leaves around that. So there's a few oleander, dark, sort of lighter leaves there, and then let's go darker for the rest of the leaves. So we can have a bit of fun going in different directions. And just sort of almost stabbing the paper and then lifting off again. Some leaves a little bit more, groups of leaves a little bit more dense than others. We've got another branch coming out there. And interconnecting them, maybe a few little branches, a few little twigs that we can see. Take it up to the edge of the paper. There. Right, a few more details on that truck, and then we're nearly, I think we're nearly done. Back to a small synthetic brush. Darker marks. The back of the truck cabin. A little bit darker in there. Inside the cabin. A few darks in there, and maybe a few darks between the spindles of the railings. So now I'm just really going around with this smaller brush, adding just a few marks here and there just to really emphasize areas a bit more. The edge of that wall, for example, and the rooftop up there. We've got a bit of shadow underneath that. Top balcony. A few more darks to emphasize that up there, down the side. Just on the other side of the cabin, there's a sort of square sign in a shop or something like that, that just further defines the top of the truck. What else? Let me just use an eraser rubber just to get out some of the pencil marks that we've got here. Just brings back a bit more crispness to the edges. Oh, there's an aerial or something. I mentioned about using these little marks here to our advantage. Yeah, I think I might just use a little bit of white just to pick up on a few highlights on the truck. So let's just use my synthetic brush here. It's got a good point to it, but I do need to make sure it's very clean, says he. I'll just squeeze out that dirty water and pick up a little bit of white gouache just to emphasize some of the little highlights here. So maybe some of these lines are catching the light. Just a few of them. Back of the truck. There, and then up this side here. Perhaps a little bit of highlight on that figure, just a tiny bit. Yep, I think I'm done actually. So that will look okay. It's got a bit of a rusty hub to it, so it's having a bit of a yellow ochre. Don't add too much attention to it. There we are. I think I'm done. Have I achieved the aim of actually a bit more of a darker shadow underneath that tire? Have I achieved the aim of the bright Greek sunshine? There we are. Not too much. Don't want to draw too much attention to wheels. I always shy away from doing wheels because sometimes you can just make them stand out a little bit too much. And it just looks a bit odd. But a Greek village scene, Mykonos, and the bright sunlight coming down, trying to get a little bit of a focal point perhaps with that chimney. I've made it, let's go back to the source photo. I've emphasized it a bit more, but it's up to you whether you make a feature of that. But trying to get that composition right of this triangle, the the chimney, the truck, the figure, the pole there, the connection of the different shapes, the geometric shape of the shadows on that left-hand side, and trying to get the feeling of a bit of light coming into this this right-hand side as well. There we are. Hope you enjoyed it.